Good evening to everyone. Throughout my rabbinate, I've often been asked, Rabbi, why does God allow bad things to happen in this world? Sometimes the questions are more specific, about an individual or a tragic accident or an incident. And when thinking back to 80 years ago, the question repeats itself. How did God allow the Holocaust to occur? During the times I went to visit Theresienstadt or Auschwitz-Birkenwald, I recall being paralyzed, overwhelmed. I remember standing on the remnants of the tracks of Auschwitz, asking myself the same question. And I remember my mind wandering like it was yesterday. It wandered into the words of Torah. You shall not murder. You shall not oppress the stranger, the words uttered to Cain when he killed Abel, the first murder in the Bible. Your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And then I came to the following realization. When God speaks and we, humanity, refuse to listen, God is rendered helpless. God knew that Cain was about to kill Abel. Pharaoh was about to kill the Israelite children. And I've always believed that this higher power, which here we name as God, gives us the freedom and has never taken it back. But those teachings attributed to God tell us how to use our freedom. And when we human beings refuse to listen, God is and remains powerless. Tonight we come together to lean into our capacity for memory and for resilience, to memorialize those loved and lost. Tonight we come together to honor the survivors and their families and their tenacity for life, a life as something to fight for, as a consciously articulated value, as something of whose fragility we are constantly aware. One might expect that trauma would turn a survivor's focus inward, making them hostile or even suspicious of the outer world. What amazes me each and every year as I listen to stories from survivors is that there is always one thread through them all. Cherish freedom. Understand what a gift it is to be able to walk in the open, to breathe free air, to go on vacation, to sit leisurely at a restaurant. And the messages are crystal clear. Love others, never hate, practice tolerance, be an upstander, have faith in life. And so on this Yom HaShoah, we commit ourselves to Yizkor, to remember, and to champion the enduring legacy of those lost and those who continue to remind us each and every day to choose life. May this be God's will as we say together, Amen. Tonight we are blessed with this reimagined experience of commemorating our Yom HaShoah at Beth Israel. Many pieces to this wonderful, thoughtful evening of reflection, commemoration, and moving forward. There have been 6 people who have been hard at work on doing that. John Lefter, Bob McNeese, Lori Shearer, Danny Siklik, Ronnie Udoff, Matt Valji. Our children, youth, teen, and youth choirs, our adult choirs, our musicians, our clergy. All of us have been intentionally thoughtful about the evening to think of and how we honor those who we continue to think of in our memories and in our hearts. We will have a wonderful guest speaker in Rabbi Jack Romberg this evening, and we are also joined by Ruth Weiss Hochberg, a Shoah survivor, this evening. We are blessed to have you in our presence. And I delight in calling upon our task force members, along with Ruth and your families, I invite you up this evening to kindle our Yom HaShoah candles. Matt, you're going to be right here at the mic. Sorry. That's good. She's going to go up. Go ahead, Matt. Matt, go ahead and start.
Blessed is the match, consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret fastness of the heart. Blessed is the heart with the strength to stop beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame.
We light this candle in memory of the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust, helpless infants, children and teenagers who were cut down like young trees before their time, before they had a chance to experience life. Too many mothers and fathers who were cruelly separated from their children and led to lonely deaths. We shall not forget.
We light this candle in memory of the 5 million additional people killed by the Nazis, not Jews, but also victims of Hitler's hate. Political opponents, priests and ministers, trade union leaders, communists, gypsies, homosexuals, the mentally and physically disabled. Too many, too many. We shall not forget.
We light this candle in honor of Franz Abbas, 14, who wrote, "I am a Jew and will be a Jew forever. Even if I should die from hunger, never will I submit. I will always fight for my people on my honor. I will never be ashamed of them. I give my word. I am proud of my people, how dignified they are. Even if I am suppressed, I will always come back to life. We shall not forget."
We light this candle in memory of all the heroes of resistance who fought on behalf of Jews, those who rose up in acts of armed resistance in the ghettos, in the death camps, and in the forests, those who smuggled food and medicine at risk of their own lives, those righteous Gentiles who resisted the evil plans of the Nazis by hiding and protecting their Jewish neighbors and even strangers. So few against so many, so important their courage. We shall not forget.
We light this candle in the memory of the Reverend Martin Niemöller, a pastor in a German confessing church who spent 7 years in a concentration camp. He wrote the following words. First, they came for the communists and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialist and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak out for me. We shall not forget.
We light this candle with the hope and the promise that genocide shall never happen again, and anti-Semitism will be extinguished. This candle is in honor of all righteous individuals who stand up and speak out against injustice and murder. This day, we each promise to make hatred and the persecution of strangers, or the persecution, strangers to our community. We shall not forget.
Ani Ma'amin, I believe, is based on the 12th of Maimonides' 13 Jewish principles of faith. Many Jews recite this Ani Ma'amin at the conclusion of their morning prayers. The penultimate line refers to the essential Jewish belief in the coming of the Messiah, or as we like to believe, in the coming of a messianic age. Although the composer is unknown, this tune comes from the Warsaw Ghetto, arranged by Erwin Joshby, and was sung on the way to the concentration camps.
We are 40,000 Jews here. There were many more of us in this place. The ones we did not load to Poland, we carried out in coffins. And in the courtyards of the barracks, we stand in the evenings longingly looking to the eternal stars on high and feel compulsively that freedom resides in the heavens and not in these barrack blocks. At night, we whisper in our dreams, how much longer? How much longer? Take note of it, brother, comrade, the song of Theresienstadt. We fight for bare life. Every day brings new misery. Pride you're not allowed to know here. You beg for a slice of bread. Earlier, you were not even allowed to fetch soup in a tin plate and slurp it up with no spoon. Here, the slogan says, eat or perish. Exposed does misery show itself, and every creature is blinded, failing in misery and stealing. Self-preservation shows itself. Take note of it, brother, comrade, the song of Theresienstadt. So we live, kept in the model ghetto, a common fate holding on to us. We Jews here, we 40,000, the leftovers of millions. We have grief, sorrow, worries, as well as a lot of pain. We live here from one day to the next, one day at a time, but still alive. Here we could be robbed of everything, tormented and harassed without end, and yet we kept the belief going that at some time things will change. And it will one day become different. And if we get out of here and become a free people on this earth, then I shall sing my song at home. If my fate should be different and I do not live to see my freedom, and also am buried here, then my poem will carry on living. When the years then go by for you, full of carefree good luck, you may then one day reflect on that time in the past. Then sing, my brother, comrade, my little song of Theresienstadt.
Shel Oy Gaber Such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears could sing against a white stone. For 7 weeks I've lived in here, pent up inside this ghetto. But I have found my people here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut candles in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears could sing against a white stone. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live in here.
Beth Israel's Holocaust Remembrance Task Force invited 8th to 12th grade students from our congregation to participate in our inaugural Holocaust essay writing contest. The topic was, think about a time in your life when you did or did not stand up or speak up against something you thought was wrong. Explain the situation and what you would do if it ever happened again. Thank you, Addie Callahan, for your thoughtful response to this prompt. I invite you to come up here and please read your essay for us. Thank
you. In middle school, a girl at my table was making racist jokes. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't have the courage to say anything. Her remarks turned anti-Semitic. I told her I was a Jew, and I didn't find her jokes acceptable. I thought I'd overcome this obstacle by speaking up for my beliefs. Sadly, I was wrong. Later in the halls, she cornered me, whispering something that would permanently change me. I'm a Nazi, I hate you, go to hell. The only thing she knew about me was I was Jewish. From then on, I was afraid to share this part of my identity. Even to this day, many years later, I'm scared. Daily, there are anti-Semitic comments at school and in the media. I would like to be open about my Jewish identity, but I still tremble in fear whenever I attempt to share this aspect of my life. Before the Holocaust, our ancestors were proud of their identity. But then it turned into something they had to hide to survive because anti-Semitism was exacerbated during Hitler's regime. How I feel today about sharing my identity is similar to his targets at the time. I too have felt this pressure to hide. I was proud of who I was. Then the people around me forced me to hide. Now, if someone says something anti-Semitic, I don't think I'd have the courage to stand up directly. I don't want to put another target on my back. This is something I'm not proud of, but because of the growing rate of anti-Semitism in our society, I continue to feel afraid. I hope that one day I'll be able to stand up for what I believe in without fear. Thank you.
Never Shall I Forget by Elie Wiesel. Never shall I forget that night, the first night in camp that turned my life into one long night 7 times sealed. Never shall I forget that smoke. Never shall I forget the small faces of the children whose bodies I saw transformed into smoke under a silent sky. Never shall I forget those flames that consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget the nocturnal silence that deprived me for all eternity the desire to live. Never shall I forget those moments that murdered my God and my soul and turned my dreams to ashes. Never shall I forget those things, even were I condemned to live as long as God Himself. Never.
This evening, we're privileged to hear from Rabbi Jack Romberg, who will share with us some incredibly important presentations on his own findings and his own experiences in searching, I suppose, for what it means to remember in this world of the Holocaust. Rabbi Romberg retired as a rabbi of Temple Israel in Tallahassee, Florida in the summer of 2019. Being a second career rabbi, he intended to enter rabbinical school after graduating from the University of Pittsburgh in 1976, where he had a BA in history focusing on Germany. But his father asked him to help in the family's furniture manufacturing business. And then in 1995, he went back to that dream and decided to pursue the rabbinate. Before retiring, Rabbi Romberg decided to write a book on his great-uncle Richard Stern, perhaps forming a third career of sorts. During his time as a rabbi, he was proud to lead organizations such as the Interfaith Clergy Association, the Village Square, and the Tallahassee Equality Action Ministry, and was on the board of the Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra for 15 years. For a special concert in 2017 that told the story of music performed by prisoners in the Theresienstadt ghetto during the Holocaust, he wrote the narrative, he selected the music, and was a narrator in the concert. He was a frequent guest speaker on local TV discussion shows and local NPR radio shows. At the retirement gala celebrating his role in the city, the mayor presented him with a key to the city. You have the key tonight here as you share with us your own teachings. I invite you to join us in the Bima, Rabbi Romberg.
Good. Okay. So, I am a first-generation American. All of my family were refugees from Germany, getting here that my parents did not know each other in Germany. They met in '52, They married in 53, and I was born in 54. Okay, so they got into America, into New York, in the late 1930s, and I'll tell you more about that. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is not just talk about Uncle Richard and the history connected to him, but I'm also going to give you some of the history of German Jews going all the way back even to the beginning of the 19th century, because then you can see why the Holocaust developed in Germany. Well, here's the first photo. That is Richard Stern, my great uncle. Do you want to take a guess who's sitting with him right there? Who's sitting with him? Correct. That was in June of 1960. I was 6 years old. While there's a lot to talk about him and what he did, the first thing I'm going to talk about is Seligman Stern. Seligman Stern was Uncle Richard's great-grandpa, and he was born in 1793 in Bavaria. Okay? Now, when he was born, what was going on to Jews in Germany was terrible. It was awful. They were not even allowed to live in a lot of places. They had to stay in their ghettos, or they had to stay in the town or city that they were allowed to live in, but there were many places, many towns and whatever, that they were not allowed to go to. And remember, if you don't know, that Germany wasn't a major place at that point. It was basically a lot of smaller states, okay? And in fact, there were 35 states. Well, in 1812, Prussia emancipated the Jews living in Prussia, which was the biggest of the states in Germany. And there wasn't a big country yet. All right. Now, Seligman Stern, like I said, he was born in Bavaria, but he decided that he wanted to live in Prussia, and he volunteered for the Prussian army in 1817 and was there for a year. And then by 1819, he moved down to live in Friesheim, which was also next to Heilerswist, okay? And this was a few group of smaller towns not too far from Cologne that Jews were able to finally move into, okay? And this is the house that he built in the 1830s. However, you should also know that in 1819, there were huge number of riots in Bavaria, and there were all kinds of things going on against Jews. Their homes were being destroyed. Their stores were being destroyed. And piles of the Germans in Bavaria were shouting, "Death to all Jews!" Well, the Jews were doing much better in Prussia. And in fact, Seligman Stern was doing better in Prussia. And one of the things he did, that he built right next to his house that I showed you, this is the blueprint of the synagogue that he not only designed, but that he built. Well, this house was built in 1898 by his grandson, Marcus Stern, who was Uncle Richard's dad. And like I said, and this was in Weilerswist, and it was the largest house built in Weilerswist, okay? Which shows that Marcus Stern had been very, very good at his business and was doing great. And like I said, this is where Uncle Richard Stern, was born in 1899 on February 22. By the way, who else was born on February 22? Who else? George Washington. Well, when I was a little boy, sometimes my dad would call Uncle Richard so that I could get on and wish him a happy birthday. So I got on one time when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and this is what Uncle Richard said. "Hello, Jackie, this is George Washington." That's what he liked to do. Well, I had to do some research for the book and on things, and I had to start in Weilerswist, and I found this. The house there had been that picture of the house I had seen it since I was a little boy. My dad had it in his office. But this picture I took of the house that is owned now by Weilerswist. And they talked to me about how fabulous it was and how they knew who Uncle Richard Stern was. And a picture that you'll see of him in a little bit that I will show is in museums all over Germany. But before we get to that, we have to talk about this. This is in the beginning of World War I, which started on July 29th of 1914. This is Uncle Richard's older brother, Heinrich Stern. And on August the 4th, he, along with a huge number of German Jews, he volunteered for the army for World War I. And he served in the army, for the German army, for the entire war. But here's the other person who served in that army. That is Uncle Richard. He was drafted into the German army in June of 1917. And very different from a lot of others, he did so many things. 80% of all the Jews in the army worked on the front line. And he, of course, was a machine gunner on the front line. This is his service booklet. It turned out that my dad had shown me all these things way back when I was a teenager. Dad showed me all these things. Why did Dad show me this? What was the big deal? Well, Dad actually was raised by Uncle Richard. He was raised by him. You'll see more about that going further. Well, this service booklet shows all of the things that he did in the war. And by the way, the big thing that's on this is that he won the Iron Cross. He became a hero for the German army in World War I. When the war was over, he became very active in the Social Democratic Party, which was important on the Weimar Republic, which is what happened in, of course, the 1920s. And here is Uncle Richard, a picture of him in the 1920s. He really enjoyed his life then. He was active, like I said, in the Social Democratic Party, and he did all kinds of things. He built his business, and he did all kinds of wonderful things and had so much fun and dated a number of women and stuff. But I have to tell you that even in the 1920s, even when the Weimar Republic was going on, have any of you ever heard of Walter Rathenau? Do you know who Walter Rathenau was? Anybody? Huh? Well, not a union leader. What he was he was the Jew who had the highest position ever in the government in Germany. He became, in the end of 1921, he became the foreign minister, which was amazing for a Jew to get that position. However, there were already a pile of people who hated the Jews, the ultra-conservative group that hated the Jews, and Rathenau was killed by them in June of 1922. So think about that, how that happened already in 1922 during the building of the Weimar Republic. Well, this is Uncle Richard's sister, Martha Stern, who married Walter Romberg. Take a guess who's sitting with her. This is in 28. And this person is 5 years old then. That's my dad, Rudy. Well, she divorced Walter Romberg when Dad was not even 3 years old, and Richard Stern became his legal guardian. So Dad looked at Richard Stern as being his dad, and Richard Stern looked at him as being his son, and you see the picture of me with Uncle Richard. He looked at me as being his grandson. Well, when she divorced, she had to get a job. She got a job at this place, a restaurant owned, one of 6 of the restaurants owned by the Katz family, who were part of the family with the Sterns. They were cousins, okay, of the Sterns. And she's in this picture, and you can see that she worked there. Well, in 1928, there was a couple of Nazis who went into this restaurant, and they claimed that what they ordered, which was a goulash, they claimed that that goulash had a dead mouse on it, and they started to go against the Katzes, who were the wealthiest Jewish family in Cologne. This is in 28, but in 1928, the court went against the Nazis and went for the Katzes. But now we get to 1933. On January 30th of 1933, Hitler was appointed to be in charge. He was given the power, and the Nazis were brought into power at the same time. And the first thing that they decided to do officially was to go against all Jewish businesses and to tell everybody in Germany to boycott the Jewish businesses. And they were setting up to do this officially on April 1st of 1933. And by the way, the 2 men in the center of this, surrounded by the SA soldiers, and one of them is holding a sign, they were 2 of the Katz men that were captured the early morning of April the 1st of 1933 and forced to walk through the streets in Cologne carrying that to show people that they should not go to Jewish businesses. And by the way, I didn't know about this until I did the research in Cologne at a museum, and the historian there told me about this, and about that it was the Katzes that were actually the ones that were made to do this. Well, the Katzes were captured and made to do this. And this is the beginning of what was going against the Jews by the Nazis and Hitler. Well, but here's Richard Stern. He's standing in the doorway of his store on April 1st of 1933. He wasn't captured at that point. He was the only Jew in Cologne, Germany, to stand up and protest against the Nazis. And it was the historian that I worked with in Cologne that actually told me he was the only Jew in Cologne to stand up and protest against the Nazis. Of course, I can't tell you how important standing up to protest against the things that are wrong is still important today. Still important today. You can see that he is next to an SA soldier. And I don't know, you can probably possibly see that he's wearing the Iron Cross that he was given in World War I. And here's another thing that he was doing. He had made this pamphlet, and this pamphlet condemns Hitler and the other Nazis. And by the way, he stood up and he told the family that he was standing up not just for the Jews, but also for civil rights. He was actually doing it for both. Well, this pamphlet not only condemns them, but it also talks about how the Jews worked for the German army in World War I, and how 12,000 Jews were killed in World War I, and that they shouldn't be mistreated. But the problem, of course, is that he was then arrested because he actually gave that pamphlet to the SA soldier that was standing next to him. Well, he was arrested, but when they took him to a police station, and at the police station, fortunately, a policeman who had worked with him in World War I and saw him as a friend asked him what happened. And what he did is he sneaked them out of the back way of the police station. And so he got back home. And at first, like many Jews in Germany, he thought, you know what? Hitler won't be kept in power very long, so maybe we'll get rid of him. But of course, by 35, he was thinking different, and things were getting worse and worse and worse. And in 37 was the arenating of Jewish real estate and businesses, and he was in terrible position with his business at that point in 37. And of course, by 38, his position, official position in the army was taken away from him. Well, you all know what happened in November of 38. Kristallnacht. My family, and in fact, not just the Sterns, but I met about a pile of the Romberg family that I never knew existed. I met them in 2011 and 12. They found me and my mom and my brothers, and I met them in 2012, and in 2013 I interviewed a huge part of them. And of course, all of my family went through Kristallnacht. Well, here's a little bit background of Kristallnacht. The killing of Ernst von Roth by Herschel Kreinspan. Now, Herschel Kreinspan, he was a Polish Jew whose family was living, like many Polish Jews had been living in Germany for a chunk of time, but he actually had moved to Paris, France. And in 1938, on October 26th, the Nazis had said that all the Polish Jews had to be out within 2 days. And actually, my dad's best friend at that time, when Dad was 15 years old, his best friend was Harry Mantel, a Polish Jew. And he helped him and his family get to a train so that they could get out. And by the way, when Dad and I were in Israel together in '73, Dad actually found him. He hadn't seen him for 35 years, but he actually found him. He thought he had been killed during the war, but he actually found him. Well, Dad actually and his mom, they were able to hide at the people's house right next to them so that nothing happened to them. And what Uncle Richard did is he actually went out of Cologne for a few days because he was very, very afraid of Dachau. See, they had been sending Jews to Dachau all since actually the end of '33. And Uncle Richard knew friends that had been sent to Dachau. And so he decided that he was going to get out of there. And he had already been working. He had actually already, several months earlier, had gotten visas for himself and for his sister and for my dad. And he was trying to finalize getting to America. But of course, there was a problem. But before I get to that, I have to show you this. This is Runstrasse Synagogue. It was the biggest synagogue in Cologne, and that's where Dad and his family were members and active on. And by the way, it's been rebuilt, but of course, it was very, very deeply damaged, of course, during the Kristallnacht. And the day after, my dad and a bunch of the other teenagers around his age, the boys, they were told they had to go to that synagogue and clean it up and take out the things that the Jews needed to use for, things when they would go to services and whatever. And it was done in a different building at that point. And Runstrasse Synagogue was unusable at that point because it was very, very, very badly damaged. So, in any case, what Uncle Richard had been doing and what he was able to do was he was able to get things set up for them to get to America. And in fact, originally, they were all supposed to go on May 15th of '39. This is Martha Stern Romberg's passport. But of course, you can see here, it says that her middle name there, is Sarah, except it wasn't her middle name. What I want to tell you is that the Nazis had made every German Jew use Sarah as their middle names. Uncle Richard was able to go on May 15th. The reason why Martha could not is she had a problem with her visa and she had to get it fixed to get to America. And she had an appointment on July 11th to get it fixed. That happens to be my dad's birthday when he turned 16. All right, Uncle Richard made it to America. Dad and his mom, Martha, were waiting to get to America. Well, in early August, Dad saw that there was an agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union, the Russians, about something with Poland. And they were supposed to get on, Dad and his mom were supposed to get on a boat in Hamburg on August 29th. Well, Dad convinced his mom that they should go to France and get actually on the boat in France. And when they got there on August 27th, and the person in charge of the boat asked Dad, "How come you came here and didn't go to Hamburg?" And Dad told him why, and he said, "You're a smart, smart man. We just canceled our stop in Hamburg." If Dad wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't be here to talk to you. Well, Uncle Richard is, of course, in New York, and he loves being in the United States and loves being in New York. And of course, in the end of 1941, America went into the war. And in 1942, Richard Stern volunteered for the American Army. And he was 43 years old. And in September of 42, he was accepted into the American Army. And he became a soldier. And in fact, he made it, the company that he was in, the division that he was in, actually the battalion he was in was the 48th Engineering Battalion. But because he had run machine guns in World War I, he was able to to work with the engineers in that battalion during the war. Well, it started that they were in the war in 43, in October 43, and on January 6th of 44, his company was at the top of Mount Portia in Italy, and they were surrounded by machine gunners of the German army, and they were being shot at, and it looked like that committee was going to be completely killed. Well, Uncle Richard stood up in front of the machine gunners and talked to them, of course, in German. And what he said to them was that he had been in the German army earlier, and that if they wouldn't surrender to that company, then they would all be killed. They surrendered to them. And he was given the Silver Star. He was given the Silver Star, and there was a beautiful letter sent to him by the general who was in charge of everything, basically, of the American Army through all of Europe. You can see, and by the way, when I learned that Uncle Richard had actually gotten the Silver Star, I was 8 years old. And when I went to visit him, I said, "Uncle Richard, where's your Silver Star?" Because I'd never seen it. And he took me in the back room, and he opened a drawer in the desk that he would work at, and he pulls it out. And he says to me, "Jackie, when you're older, if you want it, you can have it." And so I have it. Dad gave it to me, actually, when I became a rabbi. Well, this picture of Dad and Uncle Richard in the war is actually right at the end of the war, because what Uncle Richard actually found was he found one of his sisters who was actually married to a Catholic man. And they had escaped into Brussels, Belgium, just before the war, but they had to hide. And so he found them, and actually they were having problems, and he found them actually in the end of 44, and he helped them, and he said he would get them to America after the war. And he told Dad, he wrote him a letter and said, when the war is over, go to them. There were a lot of things that Richard Stern was trying to find. He was trying to find his family. And he had been trying to get members of his family from Germany to America or to London back in 40 and 41. And he had been sending letters to them and so forth. And it's because of actually somebody that I met in Cologne who wrote about the Katzes, all right? And he had a pile of letters that Uncle Richard had written to the Katzes, trying to help them and trying to get them. But those Katzes, it turns out that they were killed in different camps that the Nazis were running. Well, this, of course, is Uncle Richard's older brother, Heinrich. And he had also made it to Brussels in Belgium just before the war. But he and his wife and his daughter were captured by the Nazis. And in 42, they were sent to Auschwitz, and they were killed at Auschwitz. And Uncle Richard did not know anything of that until he did research in Cologne at the end of the war. He did the research, and he found already what had happened to a number of his family members. And of course, he was so upset that his brother had been killed. His brother had worked for the German army all through World War I and was killed. And Uncle Richard then told Dad, we have to know why it was so important that we went against the Nazis and fought against them. Well, his division was part of the group, and in fact, his division was the one that liberated Dachau. And this was a picture that somebody that he knew who did photos took the picture of the pile of Jews that they found had been killed in Dachau. So sad and so awful of what happened. In his research in Cologne, he found this. In fact, I'm now done. Okay. He found that this was his house and his place that he had lived. Finally, in 49, he got married, and this is a picture of him in 63, and you can see me and my brother and my dad, and he then was able to dress up as the Hanukkah man. So now you have a chunk of history. Thank you so much for having me here.
Jack Romberg writes, "We remember them."
At the rising of the sun and at its going down, at the blowing of the wind, and in the chill of winter, at the opening of the buds, and in the rebirth of spring. We hear them laugh, we hear them cry, we hear them sing. We remember them, we remember them. For as long as we live, they too shall live. For they are a part of us, they'll always be a part of us as we remember them. At the shining of the sun and in the warmth of winter, at the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of the fall, at the start of the year, and again at its end, we think of family, we think of our friends, we remember them, we remember them. For as long as they live, they too shall live. For they are a part of us, they'll always be a part of us as we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joy we crave to share, we remember how much they care. When we have decisions we have to make, they help us think of what's at stake. When we are seeking comfort and love, they still embrace us from above. For they are a part of us, they'll always be a part of us as we remember them, as we remember them, as we remember them.
Thank you, Rabbi Romberg, for giving us a piece of history, a piece of your life and your legacy. And each of us, and especially I'm speaking to the students that are here, we hear different stories about the Shoah. Sometimes we have the blessing of hearing survivors, and that is lessening as the years go by. And sometimes we don't always hear the stories of those that escaped and those that found their way to the States even before the atrocities of the Shoah. And so here, when we hear different elements, we have the ability to pass them down. So every time you hear a story, it's bearing witness. And there's a powerful element to bearing witness. It's not just a story, it's someone's history, it's someone's life, it's someone's legacy. and we have the power to pass it down. We also have the power to take something that was sent to be destroyed and bring it to life again. So I'd like to call upon John and Ronnie and Bob as we prepare for our dedication of our Holocaust Rescue Scroll.
The Czech Torah scrolls have a significant history and meaning within the global Jewish community. As we learned during Kristallnacht on November 9th and 10th, 1938, also referred to as the Night of Broken Glass, Jewish homes, businesses, hospitals, and schools were ransacked by Nazi attackers. Rioters destroyed 267 synagogues throughout Germany, Austria, and the area now known as the Czech Republic. More than 7,000 Jewish businesses were damaged or destroyed, and 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and incarcerated in concentration camps. After the war, surviving artifacts were found all over Europe, including in the Czech Republic. As Professor Oren Stier of the Florida International University explains, it appeared that the Nazis had wanted to preserve the relics of what they intended to have become, an extinct culture. Torah scrolls are perhaps the most sacred of these items. The Torah scrolls discovered after the war remind us of the fragility and endurance of Jewish life. In 1942, when all communities in Bohemia and Moravia were instructed to send their historical valuable items to the Jewish Museum in Prague, some members of the Prague's Jewish community persuaded the Nazis to allow them to send other religious treasures from the newly deserted communities and destroyed synagogues to the comparative safety of Prague. More than 212,000 artifacts were sent to the museum. Among them were 1,800 Torah scrolls. After the war, some 50 Jewish congregations reestablished themselves in the Czech Republic and were provided with some of these religious artifacts, not necessarily from their own communities. When the communists took over the country in 1948, Jewish communal life was again stifled and most synagogues were closed. Their possessions went to the Jewish Museum of Prague, and the Torah scrolls were transferred and warehoused in the damp and ruined synagogue of Michle, outside of Prague, where they remained until they came to London in 1964.
In 1964, Rudolf Jablon, a British solicitor and philanthropist, became aware of the Torah scrolls and funded the purchase and transport of 1,564 Torah scrolls from Czechoslovakia and donated them to Westminster Synagogue in London. The scrolls were shipped across Europe by train to London, where they were cataloged, repaired, and restored when possible. Each Torah was given a numbered brass plaque that identified its origin. Scrolls that could not be restored were sent on loan to religious and educational institutions as memorials. Scrolls repaired and able to be used in religious services were sent on loan to fulfill requests of synagogues all over the world in return for a contribution toward the restoration expenses. In London, they have been administered by the Memorial Scrolls Trust, which took on the task of preserving and distributing these scrolls to Jewish communities throughout the world. The Memorial Scrolls Trust, having assumed the responsibility for the rescued Torah scrolls, works to this day to educate people globally about the history of Czech Jewry through their care of the scrolls and through their loans. And synagogues and Jewish institutions all over the world can apply, as we have, to serve as custodians of individual scrolls and their stories.
Our community is privileged to have received on loan scroll number 1,260 from the towns of Pizik and Strakonitz, which is unusual as they are two distinct towns, although they are quite close, about 12 miles apart. The scroll was cataloged in the Prague Jewish Museum during the war as artifact number 73,490 of the 212,000 artifacts. Tonight we commemorate the individuals from Písek and Strakonitz who were killed in the Shoah. In 1930, the Jewish population of Písek was 264, and the population of Strakonitz was 169. The scroll was labeled as coming from Písek-Strakonitz, but the Memorial Scrolls Trust has no further information on which of the two towns this scroll originates. We therefore honor the memory of the Jews of both those towns. To some, the rescued scrolls may represent sorrow, the sorrow of a lost world, but they are also a symbol of hope as they are read and used, becoming part of the many communities, museums, and educational institutions around the world. Over the 6 decades since their arrival in London, the racks of the Memorial Scrolls Trust have grown emptier as one scroll after another has been returned to its rightful place in Jewish life, teaching and encouraging many not to only think of the 6 million Jews who perished, but also to stand against racism and teach the world justice, compassion, and build a better and kinder world. It is truly an honor for us to add this Torah scroll to our holy ark. The fact that it was written by hand in the 19th century and made its way across the ocean after surviving 2 world wars is astounding. Its value is unquantifiable, and we are proud and honored to give this Torah a home at Congregation Beth Israel. And now we have a special guest. I'm so pleased. The rabbi spoke of our dwindling Holocaust survivors, but I have the pleasure of introducing Ruth Weiss Hoberg, painter, photographer, artist, author. She wrote the book Getting Here, An Odyssey Through World War II, her own memoir. A girl from Bielsko, her hometown. Vignettes from life, moments and memories, going places, witness and survivor. And she translated the book written by her great uncle, The View from Jerusalem, from German into English. And she is first and foremost a Holocaust survivor. We are delighted that for the past 23 years, she has lived in San Diego and can be with us tonight. Please welcome Ruth Hoberg.
Don't do that, I'm going to cry. In connection with this Torah being on loan, I just would like to add that this is happening all over the country. Many years ago, I participated in a similar ceremony in Westchester County, New York, where they got a Torah, I believe, from some place in Czechoslovakia as well. So it's a movement, and it's a wonderful thing. Now, Ronnie had asked me to say something about home and not home. So I prepared something, and I'm going to try to read it. When I was a little girl, the word home implied comfort and security for me. I never thought about it particularly until I didn't have a home. So in any case, I've been thinking about this and find that home is a basic need. Most animals have a home where they go to give birth and feed their young. Birds have their birds have their nests. Foxes, wolves, and bears have their dens. Certain fish return to the same part of the globe to breed. We humans build domiciles of various shapes to accommodate our needs for shelter and a sense of security. We imbue certain objects, like the Torah, that we hold dear, such as those connected with religious rituals and with some of the same needs as we humans have. Personally, I have been dislocated from the home I knew as a very young child and moved to several places in the world by dint of war, places I couldn't call home. Whenever somebody would tell me to go back home, I would say, oh, I'll go back to my cabin or to the place where I live, when referring to the place where my family slept. I could not bring myself to say home. Several years after arriving in the US, I was mature enough and felt secure enough to call anywhere I am home. I can go to a hotel room and go back home. The significance has changed. I don't know the extent of this Torah's wanderings and sufferings, but I appreciate that Congregation Beth Israel has undertaken the responsibility of giving a lovingly copied specimen of our holiest document, the Pisek Strakonitze Torah, a secure, permanent home in this ark. Thank you.
I would ask everyone to please rise. There is nothing more sacred and more revered in Jewish life than our holy Torah. Our souls are connected to its history and its teachings. Tonight, we add another sacred scroll, this one a symbol of survival, a model of resilience, a beacon of hope amidst a time of intense hatred, destruction, and genocide. In this moment, we consecrate ourselves to its place within our Beth Israel community to serve as a sacred tool of teaching and learning, of hope and potential. I'm going to invite you to say a blessing after me. Just repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai.
Baruch atah Adonai.
Eloheinu melech haolam.
Eloheinu melech haolam.
Hamilamed.
Hamelamed.
Torah.
Torah.
La'amo.
La'amo.
Yisrael.
Yisrael.
Blessed are you, Adonai.
Blessed are you, Adonai.
Who teaches Torah.
Who teaches Torah.
To your people Israel.
To your people.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Adonai b'simcha bo lefana birnana, lefana birnana. Ivdu et Adonai b'simcha, ivdu et Adonai b'simcha bo lefana birnana, lefana birnana. Eitz chayim hi lemachazikim ba v'tom
As you remain standing, and as Rabbi Gimbel will share with you our next steps, just a note that the cover that you see in there while playing right now, crafted by Susan Hutchison, who I know is watching from our clergy suite, with great compassion, with great intention, has crafted that cover fitting beautifully onto this new scroll that's housed with us. And over the next couple of months, we'll design it and curate it to have such depth and meaning that every time we open our ark and see its beauty, we will know that someone so imbued in our synagogue, 23 plus years, has crafted a piece of love from her heart. And so we thank you, Susan, for all that you have and continue to give to our community.
We will conclude our ceremony of memory today at our Kriya memorial out in our courtyard. What I'm going to ask you to do might be challenging, because I know most of you. In honor of the 6 million Jews who were murdered at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators, we are going to honor 6 minutes of silence as we move from our sanctuary to the Kriya. I'd like to invite our choirs to lead our way so that they may be set up. And we look forward to seeing you at the Kriya as we conclude together. On your way out, there are candles provided by the Men's Club that we invite you to light when you go home, as well as prayer sheets that we will be using in the courtyard.
And we're also inviting you to take one per family. In addition to lighting at home, we're going to ask you to light them now. One that you can light now, and we're going to ask everyone to place each of the yellow candles around the Kriya monument, so that before we say our words of Kaddish, that we can hold the light and the potential in all of us. So we invite you to take this moment in silence, take outside in the courtyard and in the vestibule. There are lighters and matches. We invite you to place your candle around the Kriya garden.
Yeah, please come closer. And come, those of you who have lit candles, come place them here on the table. We are standing here in front of the artist rendition of the Kriya ribbon, a torn ribbon that reminds us that our hearts are torn. We use it every time someone that we love dies. It reminds them who see it, those who see it, that someone has been lost. This iron Kriya ribbon reminds us that 6 million Jews plus millions of others have died. And every day we are reminded that we will never forget. On your prayer pages are two things. One is the El Malei Rachamim, the prayer for the soul. This is particular to the Shoah, to the Holocaust. I will chant in Hebrew and then we will read together in English. The Kaddish on the back of this was created by Elie Wiesel and reminds us of all of the camps and ghettos where Jews died. And we will recite it together.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Keroshim Utorim, Kezoar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmot 6 מיליון אחינו ואחיותינו שנהרגו ושנשרפו על קידוש השם בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור ביצור החיים את נשמתם אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום על משכבם ונאמר Amen. Fully compassionate God on high, to our 6 million brothers and sisters murdered because they were Jews, grant clear and certain with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and pure, whose brightness shines over the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold them in the embrace of your wings. Secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, they are yours. They will rest in peace. Amen. Yitkadal, Auschwitz, V'yitkadash, Lodz, Shemei Rabbah, Ponar, V'alma Divra Chirutei, Babiyar, V'yamlich Malchutei, Maidanek, B'chayechon Uv'yomechon, Birkenau, Uv'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, Kovno, Ba'agala Uv'izman Kariv, Janauska, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach, Le'alam Ulolmei Almaya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach, Theresienstadt, V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam, Buchenwald, V'yitnaseh V'yitadar, Treblinka, V'yitaleh V'yitalal, Vilna, Shmei Kudsha, Brichu, Bergen-Belsen, Le'alma, Mauthausen, Mikol Birchata V'shirata, Dachau, Tushbechata V'nechemata, Minsk, Da'amiran Be'alma, Warsaw, V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
We end with words of hope. Hatikvah, Israel's national anthem, our homeland. It may not be perfect, sometimes less perfect than others, but it's ours, and it will always be there for us.
Amen.
Food is on the way, right?
If you have an iPhone with a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge and know someone named Barbara Rodney, please come see me.